Okay, you guys ready to get going in a little bit? Everybody feel recharged from some glucose and
We get some.
some food? Yeah. Good. Okay, cool. So let's dive into some steps in what we need to do for data analysis. And what I'd like to do is work through some of the steps that we've been going through in MATLAB. If you'd like to,
Turn it off.
Naomi, I know you don't like drawing on the board, but if you wouldn't mind hitting the light switch. Fantastic trade. Is that a good trade? No? Is that a good trade?
Oh,
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Okay, so let's get back in our MATLAB environments. Hopefully everybody has MATLAB up and loaded. For some people who who have sort of funky administrative permissions, you might need to reset your path. Right? You guys know how to do that, right? I think Love it and Brittany, you guys might need to reset the path, but hopefully that should just take a moment. Make sure it's set to include add with subfolders for EEG Lab, and you're pretty much good. The rest of you guys, hopefully it automatically saves so you don't have to do that again. And so we want to be directed into our folder for data sets. And what I wanted to do is first ask is who remembers basically where we left off last class? Yeah, we talked a little about scripting here, Ryan.
We just, I think we finished like, you want us to do the whole 30
Yeah, I said try to get that done 30 subjects. Wonderfully, you were able to do that at home. What I'd like to be able to encourage you guys to do is for those of you guys who haven't gotten through processing 30 subjects to continue to do that. Later on, hopefully today we'll have some time where you can do that and at home. But hopefully everyone here has had the ability to process at least 5 or 10 subjects. Has anybody not processed 10 subjects? 6? Okay, so 6 is our minimum. Okay. Has anybody else not processed 10? Okay, a couple. Okay. How many have you guys processed? I'm sorry?
6.
6 and 5?
6.
Okay, so 5 is our minimum. Okay, we'll work with 5 if we need to. And so I want to build from that and sort of learn about what do we do next. So we've begun our what we first called we had a chunk of stuff in pre-processing, right? And that was all done basically in EEG Lab. And that's another thing you might want to be familiar with for the test, is be able to explain to someone on the street who doesn't know anything about this, what the difference is between EEG Lab and ERP Lab is. That is, what's the difference between EEG and ERPs? Okay, and so we worked with EEG Lab to pre-process our data, right? Can anybody remember the 3 steps that were done to the data before we touched it? That I did for you? That we imported the data as? Yes?
You already brought it down to the 256 hertz.
So we downsampled to 256 hertz. What did we do before that? Yeah. We applied a high-pass filter. Does anybody know the parameter of the high-pass filter that we applied? 0.5, exactly. Yeah. And before we did any of that, we imported the data, and it was re-referenced to which sites? The average of the 2 mastoids, which is important. It wasn't just to a mastoid, it's the average of both of them. So those are our first 3 steps in pre-processing. And we tend to forget about them because they're already done for us, but they're important to know. Those are actually the first 3 steps. Then what do we do after, basically what was our first step then after those initial 3 steps that were done? Yes?
Look at the data set.
Okay, so we loaded the data set, and then what was the first step that we did to actually manipulate the data? Yes? Okay, so we added channel locations, so the program now knows where every electrode is actually spatially located. What did we do after we loaded channel locations? Exactly, we created an advanced events list, which gave us a label to characterize every type of possible event that could have occurred, which happened to have been 75, based on our combination of confidence responses for 3 different conditions. Now, what do we do after we had an events list? David? Yes, we epic the data. Exactly. And what do we do after epicing?
Artifact rejection.
Artifact rejection. Exactly. Kick the bad ones out of the club. They don't have to go home. They just can't stay here. And what do we do after artifact rejection? We created our ERP set, right? So now we make that fundamental transition. We stop using EEG lab as much. Now we're using ERP lab. Because now we're not dealing with EEG data as much as we are with, we're now ERPs, which is a way of looking at EEG. That is, now we're looking at the potential, the electrical measurement, that's related to our discrete events that we've identified and cut the data into slices. So now we're working in ERP lab, and the first way we did that was we created the ERP file, or created the ERP set. Now what do we do after that? After we created an ERP file, what do we do? Yeah, we probably did save it, didn't we? Okay. Yeah, what do we do after that? Bin operations, really important step. What did we do with bin operations? Fundamentally, what is that doing to the data?
Label cat.
Come again?
Label different categories.
Yeah, we're labeling different categories. In fact, we're creating new categories, right? Bin operations is where we do our math operations. That's why they call it operations, is you're doing math on the bins. You can average different conditions together. You can add them against each other. You can subtract them from each other, right? We talked about subtraction analysis, right? Okay, so bin operations is really important. And we apply that, and then I believe that you guys went through the process then of looking at the ERPs, right? And when you inspect those individual ERPs, you can very usefully identify if you might have accidentally included some bad artifacts. And also, we created those topography maps, right? Okay, let's see here. So, what I'd like to do today then is build from having saved our ERP file with the bin operations, which should be your subject number underscore bin op or whatever your label was for those subjects. And what we need to do, right, because we need to write a thesis. We need to write our discovery. We need to report to the world your scientific insight of what you discovered in this brainwave data. When we report that, we need to report the statistics. And the statistics are going to be of our effects that we discover at the group level, right? So it's very useful to do what you guys just did, which is to look at the individuals. But ultimately, the end game, what we need to do is we need to plot the ERPs and the topography map, not of the individuals, but instead of groups. Or just of one group, and compare that against a different condition within that group. And so, that's what I want to focus on today. How do we create a grand average that lumps a bunch of subjects together, and then extract the statistical information, the numbers that we need to analyze to find out if there's a statistically significant or reliable effect. And then we're going to plot the topography maps for that, and the ERPs for that. Does that sound like a plan? So I wanted to introduce, that's our target, that's our destination that we're going to get to. And it's actually a pretty easy series of steps, okay? So, it's just a really easy series of like 200 or 300 steps, and I'm kidding. What? I'm just kidding, it's only a few. Okay. So, let's take a look here. Does this work out? Do you guys, by the way, I should say, do you guys like it when I have it on the whiteboard and I can draw stuff together with the projection, or do you want it on the real white background on the screen?
It depends. If you're gonna write a lot, then yeah. But
Okay.
if you're not gonna write a lot, I can put it.
Okay. Well, let's see how much we do. I like being able to write a little bit, but let's see. If you can't see if it becomes a problem, then just let me know. We'll switch back to the screen. Okay. So what I have here is we have our folder, and we basically have data. ERPs in here. Okay. So what I'm going to do is let's say that I want to create that's right. And let's say type. We had a couple different bin operations, ERPs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to load up, and actually you don't even need to load it. The first thing we want to do, just to cut to the chase, is we want to create a grand average of multiple subjects, right? So, very simply, we're going to select this option down here at the bottom, which is average across our ERP sets to make a grand average. Now, a little warning. Every now and then, for reasons unknown, sometimes ERP Lab gives an error message after you create a grand average, or before when you're trying to create a grand average. That was in years past when I've taught this class, and the easy workaround that we discovered was that it's a goofy little bug that if you just re-download ERP Lab, just real quick from the website, you just repaste that folder in, it just fixes it and it works fine. Why is there a difference? I don't know. I just know that that's an easy fix. So in case it might happen later on down the road, know that it's predicted and it's an easy solution. Well, let's see if we can just sort our way through this. Now I'm going to average across ERP sets. Now what that does is it brings up another GUI that we've been used to, okay? And it's going to ask us to do a couple things. Okay, so we get some options. We can load a list of subjects that we might have already created. We have not yet created that yet, so we'll hold off on this for now. But really what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to add an ERP set. Okay? So I'm going to add an ERP set from some that I've created already, just like you have. Okay? And the way that I'll do that, okay. So let's say that you have a list and, we said 10, right? So I'm going to grab 10 subjects. So that might be subjects 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And you're going to grab whichever ones you have done, okay? And what that'll do is that'll create a list. And you have a list in here, it tells you your directory, your path directory, and then it tells you your ERP file. Now, a couple things to note that are important. Any subject that you select is going to be averaged together, which means that there's a couple things that it really needs to have happen, or it will give you an ugly error message. Okay, so two big things it needs to have happen is it needs to make sure that every subject has the exact same channels and locations, which is why we loaded them first. Because you can't really average stuff together if they're like crisscrossed, you know? Secondly, you need to make sure that every subject has the same number of bins and that they basically mean the same thing, which is why we applied bin operations to every single subject in the same way. So,
The first one was what?
they need to have the same channels and channel locations. So again, this should not be an issue
Because we did that when we were on.
because hopefully every one that you've done so far, but I only say that because some people have processed more or less subjects than other people, and when we go through this practice right now and doing this demonstration, make sure that you only select the subjects that you know that you've done all that for. That is, that you've really completed the whole bin operations process for. And as long as you do that, it should work just dandy. Okay? And let's see if that works. And so really all you need to do from there is basically leave everything else the same. So a couple features here, okay? Keep these two boxes checked. They're very good. And one thing that's useful is that it includes the standard error of the mean. So if any of you guys remember your statistics and you know the usefulness of showing variability or variance in your data, this is going to be a nice little function that we can return to later. So when we plot stuff later, I'll come back to this and we'll see how useful that is. So keep this stuff, keep those two boxes checked, and ultimately just hit the apply button or whatever the OK button is at the bottom right hand side of your screen. Okay, so that's in there. It's gonna ask me if I want to save my list. I think you kind of have to anyways. I just say save and continue. It'll ask me to save it. I'm gonna call it my sample ERP list, and I like to underscore it and provide a suffix that says the sample size, just so I know how big that list is later on if I need it. So my sample size here is I grabbed 10. Okay, so and so MATLAB will think it'll work. We can see it working here in our command window. So it's loading all of our subjects, and in a moment it will come up and it'll ask me, we have now created a grand average ERP file. What would you like to do, or do you want to save it? We're going to save it, we're going to name it, and then we're going to work with it in very similar ways to what you guys have already done. Okay, so here's our little prompt. It's going to ask, it says, you have created a new ERP set. What would you like to do with it? Okay, what we are going to do is we are going to create a new ERP set. Let's call it group grand average, and I'll underscore n of 10. So this is just something, it's just a name, you figure out a name. But for now, since it's just a demonstration for me, this is my demonstration of a group, grand average, with a sample size of 10. Okay? Now, just like we remember having done in our individual ERP sets, we'll do something similar for our grand average group file, which is we're going to save it, okay? And really simply, we want to make sure that this name is the same one there. So as long as you hit this button here, I think it says save the same name, it'll repopulate that. So let's take a quick look, make sure that works. Save it. Save as group name. Oh, I guess I got to type it in, huh? What did I say there? Group. Okay, so that's pretty easy. Just hit OK. And it'll save it, and now we know it's done. Now it tells us again, if we would type ERPH, it tells us what's our equivalent command. So remember, Nicole, you asked earlier in the class about learning more about the scripting and the coding, right? So we can code for that too. And it'll tell us what that script is, which is basically our grand averager, and then we're going to save the herb. Okay, so just I'll show you that in a little bit more detail. Okay, so we can grab those two things, copy. I create a new script on my top left. It opens that up. I hit Control V to paste. I'm going to add some spaces in here. Okay, what this is showing us, okay, is for those of you guys who are interested in the scripting side of it, okay, it's showing us that the first thing we did was create grand average. Grand averager, it gives us your path or your directory. So this is your path directory here. And it also says the text file that we saved that list as. And then we also said that we want to include the standard error of the mean, or the SEM. So it gives us our little code for including those things. And then it did that really easily, and this is just saving. So save my ERP. It asks us what is the name. We tell it we want to call it grand average n of 10. Okay, so this is our file name. So this is what we name the ERP, then we name the file, and the file name is of course the same name. And then of course it asks us what is the path for that file, the file path, the directory, where do you want to save it? And we just gave it our folder, our directory. Does that all sound good? Pretty easy? Really similar to what we did before, right? So this is just showing you the inside sort of inner workings of what we just did with our GUI, our graphic user interface. Okay? Now let's actually work with the data a little bit now. So, what we can do is we can see that first of all, if we click on our ERP set menu, it says our first ERP set is this Title 1. Group grand average with a sample size of 10. So this is going to work really, really similarly to what we've done with the individual ERPs. So we can plot the ERPs. We can also plot our topography maps. Okay? So here's what we'll do. Let's try that out. We don't need to apply bin operations because we averaged across a bunch of subjects who already had those bin operations applied. Okay? So we can go straight to plotting the ERPs. And let's take a look at the waveforms. Now, I don't want to do all bins. Let's say that I'm going to do bins 88 and 87 because I know those correspond to when they said item recognitions judgments of 4 and item recognition judgment of 5. Now we talked about that a few minutes ago, right? As a hypothesis. So I'm not yet including the source memory judgment. I just want to look at the 5s and 4s, just for demonstration's sake. So those are, I know off the top of my head it's 88 and 87.
How did it take you to memorize all of those?
I mean, I did this for years.
Okay.
Years. And
I
I
just like you just like know it.
Yeah.
Like, got this one.
Way longer than you ever want to know. I'll make it 32 channels, and I like to make my line thickness a little thicker. This is just my preference. So what I do is I hit line spec, and it usually takes about 20 seconds to think. And then it brings up this little menu. And you can change your colors, but if you change the line thickness from 1 to 2, it makes the ERP lines a lot thicker to see. So this is just a little thing that I'll do so that you can see it better on the screen. And then we'll hit plot. Okay. So now we can look at our group ERPs. Okay. Now let's take a look. So you guys notice that we have our the line is a little bit thicker, easier to see. Just a visual thing, just an illustration thing. Art. Okay. So let's see here. The other thing too. I've made my window wider so it goes further back than 200 milliseconds. But really, this is kind of the idea. Now this is from about 800 milliseconds here. From about 6 to 9, we see at our P3 site. Where's P3? Yeah. None of you guys thought of questions to ask about the 1020 system. Okay, so we can look at that, okay? And we know that that's basically our parietal effect, right? Between our conditions that are high confident controlled, and that's what's being shown. The black line is the bubble 5s, and the red are the lower confident item 4 recognition responses. Okay? So, let's see here. What strikes you about this? Anything off the bat? It's a little noisy, isn't it? A lot of EMG almost, it looks like. Right? It's very jaggedy. Right? Now, part of that is because we have a very low sample size. It's only 10. When you average your 30 subjects, later, you're going to see it's a lot more smooth. Okay? But even when you have 30, you'll see that it's still a little rough, still a little jaggedy with some EMG. So there's a different kind of filter that we're going to apply. Remember we did the high pass filter early in? We are now going to do a low pass filter. A low pass filter basically lets everything pass that is lower than the number that we give. So we're going to use 30 hertz low pass filter. And what that means is that everything beneath that number of 30 hertz is going to be allowed to pass through to the next stage in the game. Everything above 30 hertz is going to be filtered out. So why is that useful? Well, EMG is really high frequency, much higher, that we know is not basically neural. So let me show you how we're going to apply that function. Okay. We're going to go to ERP Lab. We're going to go to Filter and Frequency Tools. Okay. Filters for ERP data. Okay, it's going to bring up this little menu. What we're going to do is it already has our low pass button highlighted, which is perfect. So basically ERP is really, really handy for the ERP lab. They went to a lot of work, and we did actually. I was one of the beta testers for it. We went to a lot of work to try to make it very, very logical and already kind of like done for you. So you already have the button selected for a low pass filter, and it already tells you it's at 30 hertz. So really all you have to do is hit OK, wherever that button is, probably at the bottom right hand side. Okay. So that's what we're going to do. Just hit apply. And it's going to ask us to save it again. And so I'm going to do that. Now, at the end, I'm just going to add the suffix that I'm going to say 30 hertz. And I'm going to abbreviate low pass with LP. Okay? And I get to save it again. So I hit this button here to save, and I'll save it as the same. It's really, really easy. Just hit OK. So now we have that. Now if you want to see what that code was, you can copy that. We'll paste it back in here just to keep a record. Okay, and that's what we're seeing here. So we created our grand average, we saved that grand average, and now we applied our filter to the ERP. It was from our channels 1 to 38. Our cutoff was 30 hertz. And that's pretty much it. And it was a low pass. Just tells us what you did. Now let's take a look and let's plot it again. Let's see if it changed it. So the other thing we can do too is when I hit this button up here for ERP sets, you should see that you have a second one now, right? They should be named differently. So that just lets you know which one you're working on. So we're working on the grand average 30 hertz file. And let's just see if we plot our ERPs again. Everything is the same because the memory remembers what we had in the system. Let's just plot. So we were at P3 before, right? Yeah? Let's take a look. Look at that sucker. What do you think?
Not
Is it-
as nice.
Is it prettier? I think it's a lot prettier. It's a lot. You can make sense a lot more out of it, can't you? So do you see now, like visually, what that low pass filter is doing? You see how it works really nicely to clean up that EMG noise? Pretty cool, right? And look at how prominent it makes this effect come up here. Isn't that really? Isn't it? Here, look at this. We'll look at them right next to each other. Okay, check this out. That. This version versus that version. Look at that difference. Same exact data, well not quite, one's filtered of course. Did you guys see the difference that filtering can make? If you do it right and you use the right filter for the right reasons, it can be very, very helpful to salvage your data. You want to make sure you read up Steve Luck's chapters on filtering because there's some real dangers that can come with filtering. The thing about filtering is no matter what you're doing, you're always changing the data. The question is, are you changing it in a good way or a bad way? And this is a question of carefulness. You want to be very careful to know what you're doing and the reasons why that you're doing it, so that when you change the data, you're doing it for the right reasons. Does that make sense? Pretty cool, huh? Okay, so this is really kind of what we want to be working with then, right? Yeah? Okay. So, let's see here. Maybe there's a, let's check out F3. So that's pretty cool. So if you look at the frontal sites as well, about 400 and 600, we can see that the black line is more positive than the red line. Again, so you get this FN 400 for familiarity-based differences. And so that's pretty cool. Now, this is kind of where all the money making happens. Because I can point this out to you, right? I can say the black line is more positive than the red, right? So we have an FN 400. Now, Nicole, earlier in the class, you were drinking some haterade. And we were playing the game of like, where you were going to tell me, no, that's not right, or you can't do this. Now, if you were a hostile reviewer, no, not even a hostile reviewer, if you were a good scientist, what would you do to hold the fire to your best friend? And say, no, I'm your friend, so I'm going to make sure you have this right, and I'm going to hold you to the fire, and I'm going to make you better as a friend, as a colleague, and as a scientist. Would you be satisfied when I said, oh yeah, look, no, the black line's a little bit bigger than the red? Why would you not be satisfied as a good friend, a good colleague?
Probably wants actual numbers, just saying, oh, the black line is bigger than the red line. They're not looking at that.
Yeah, exactly. We want to quantify this difference, not just qualify the difference. So this is a qualitative difference. This is just looking at a picture. Oh, the black looks a little bit bigger than the red, yeah. No, we want to quantify. We're scientists. We want to know the math. We want to know the statistics. We want to know the real data. This is just a picture. Okay? So, what we're going to do is basically work on extracting these statistics. Sound good? Okay. Let's take a look and look at how we're going to do that. Okay? So, we're going to again work in our menu for ERP Lab. Okay? So we're in ERP Lab, okay? Now, notice that we're moving further and further down for the most part, right? Which is kind of convenient that we're always moving down in our processing pipeline, okay? So what we're going to do here is, let's see here, we've already filtered, we've already done epics, we've already done bin operations, we've already plotted our ERPs. What we want to do is what we're down here. We're going to do ERP measurement tool. Because again, we want to quantify our differences. We want to have something to write home about and write in our results. So we want to measure those ERP differences. Okay, so we're very simply going to pick the option that lets us have a tool to measure the ERPs. Pretty straightforward. Okay. So here's what you're going to do. Select that sucker, and it works really simple. Okay, it needs to know some information from us, just like all of our little processes need to know, and we're just going to give it to it. The first thing it wants to know is, so you are queen of your castle. You are a king of the realm, right? And this is ERP Lab, MATLAB is your servant. It's your slave, it's your robot, right? It's just your computer program. So you call up your servant and you're like, servant, bring me the ERP measurements. And he goes, oh, yeah, sure. What kind of measurements do you want, and what do you want me to measure of? Is the first thing he needs to ask. And because it wants to do what you're asking, right? It's like a really good puppy. You guys have dogs? Right? I got about a 3-year-old greyhound dog. They love to get your affection by by satisfying what you're asking, right? If you want to go play fetch, it loves for you to give it a pat on the back because it did what you asked. It wants to do what we asked too. So first thing it needs to know is what files do we want to measure? So we're going to pick those same 10 subjects. So that's the first thing we're going to do, just like we did in grand averaging. We're going to populate this, okay, with our subjects. And we'll do that by loading files in a minute. The other thing it's going to ask us is for a couple other details. Okay? So these details are things that it needs to know. Okay? So it needs to know what are we going to measure. Okay? And we're going to walk through these piece by piece. It's going to want to know what bins do we need to measure. Okay? It's going to want to know what channels do we want to measure it on. It's also going to want to know, let's see here, when do we want to have a baseline period for comparison? It's going to want to know the time that we're measuring between. So it's very, very similar to plotting our topography maps. Remember how we had to fill in all this information? And that's kind of what we're going to do. And then down here, it's going to ask us to save it as a file. And we're going to give it a name. Okay, so, by the way, am I moving too fast? Okay. Everybody feel good? Everybody's with me? Okay, I'm just going to go and show you how to do this. So, I think, let's see here. First thing I'm going to do is select this button down here that says From ERP Sets. And that's going to allow these fields down here to become active. And so what's really nice, I'm going to see if I can pull this off, is we could add our ERP sets. But remember I had a list of like those 50 ERP subject files, and I just grabbed 10 of them? I forget which 10 I grabbed off the top of my head. I can find it out if I need to. But let's see if I can just load in that file that I saved. That listed, remember? Let's take a look. So I'm going to say load list. And there it is. Sample ERP list of sample of 10. Open. Ah, sweet. Okay. So populate. So that automatically brings in my same 10 subjects. So that's a big relief. Whew. All right. So that's nice. Now let's move to the next fields. What we want to do is we're going to start changing some of here. We're not going to do bin 3, all of the bins. But what were those 2 bins that I typed in our ERPs? It was 88 and 87, right? Because that's all I want to measure. I just want to measure the difference between those 2 conditions. So, let's fill that in. Now, if you didn't know those numbers, you can hit Browse, and just like it does for our topography maps, you can find the ones that you're interested in. Okay? So, am I correct in assuming that for the most part, when I just say that I dial in these numbers, that you guys understand that we can get it from here too? Okay, cool. Let's do that. That's out of there. I'm going to type in 88 and 87. Now channels. Let's just keep it simple right now. We were looking at left parietal site P3, right? Okay, so let's just get the statistics for one electrode. Sound good? And we browse to find out what that is. Let's see where P3 is on here. I believe it's number 12. There it is. So hit 12 and hit OK. Now it asks us for the measurement. Okay? And what does it say? Now there's a neat little thing here. gonna say that you save the file as, I'll browse to make sure I put it in somewhere. Let's say it's this list. Now I like to make sure that I note what electrode site it is. So I'll say P3, and I'm measuring it at 600 milliseconds. So I like to add that in so that you know what the data shows. Now you also want to add in a name of what the conditions are. So I'm going to say it's old 5 versus old 4 conditions. So that's everything that we're looking at. This is our group. Sample size of 10 at site P3. Put your time in, and then you put your conditions that are being compared. This way, if you ever need to come back to the data, it's not too confusing. Okay? Let's see. Okay. And let's. And so it'll measure that for us. It'll take a minute to think through. Now, when it does that, it also gives us, just like we've talked about before, our equivalent commands. So if you ever wanted to know what the code was for that, you can get that too through ERPH, and you can copy and paste that in our command list as well. So I'm just going to copy that, just for good measure. We'll paste it into our list. And we always know what we kind of got going. Okay. So, are there questions on that process right now? What do you guys think? Is it manageable? Were you guys able to follow along with your own sets?
I got kind of long.
Okay. Where'd you get lost at? Which can we pick up from?
I think for the, when you save the ERP list, right?
Yeah?
Well, actually, I got one. So, when in the beginning when I did plot, it kept popping up that like I'm not within the range, right? When you did the 88 and 87, so I did like a lower one.
Okay.
I'm not sure if we're supposed to have. I don't know.
Okay. I'll take a look at that in a minute. Let's see what we can sort out.
And then when the ERP, which I thought I saved it or opened it or something, but so when it came time to add the ERP side again, I couldn't find it. So there's just some bugs. I'm just like, okay, what did I do wrong?
Okay. We will. We'll
I'm not
work-
sure. Can you hear me?
I can hear it.
Okay.
Yeah. We will work on that together in just a minute.
Yeah.
Okay. For the most part, was everybody else able to keep pace? Okay. So let's dive into the numbers because now we've pulled the numbers out. Now we need to dive into them. Okay. So if you go to our folder, where our directory is, where data sets, wherever that is, data, PG, sets. And so you'll see, especially if you group it by the date modified, the last